My name is Brina Myers, and I was 33 years old the week my own parents betrayed me in a way I never thought possible. Dios mío. There are wounds that arrive like thunder, and then there are those that slip quietly into your heart, disguised as love, only to leave devastation behind. I was more than 8,000 miles away, immersed in a bridge restoration project near Lisbon, when my phone vibrated with a message that changed everything. A photograph, nothing more. At first glance, it looked ordinary. A familiar stretch of grass, the white clapboard walls, the green front door I had loved since childhood. My home, my sanctuary, the place where every memory of my grandfather still breathed through the wooden beams. And then I saw it. A bright red sign. Sold. The word struck me like ice water poured directly into my veins. For a moment, I simply stared. No, that couldn't be right. I hadn't listed the house. I hadn't spoken to a realtor. I hadn't signed a single document. Yet there it stood, planted proudly in the front lawn, where my grandfather once grew tomatoes beneath the summer sun. The message underneath the photo was from my neighbor, Cora. Brina, Carino, is this real? I felt my pulse stumble. The coffee in my hand suddenly tasted bitter, because deep inside, before I even understood why, something whispered that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal, and betrayal, mi amor, always leaves fingerprints. People often assume structural engineers are cold women. We are not. We simply trust things that can carry weight. Steel, concrete, mathematics. Most people, unfortunately, cannot. My entire life had been built one verified load at a time. No shortcuts, no favors, no rescue. Everything I had belonged to me because I had earned it. Everything except one precious thing. The little white house on Mill Road. The only place in the world where I ever allowed myself to be soft. My grandfather, Walter Hale, bought that house in 1971. For 50 years, he poured his soul into it. Every railing, every cabinet, every nail, every creak in the floorboards carried his touch. When I was little, he taught me how to use a level before I could properly tell time. When I graduated, he placed the old brass front door key into my palm and folded my fingers around it. I can still hear his voice. A house isn't wood and nails, Corazon. It's a promise you make to yourself. For 11 years, I carried that key everywhere. I still do. The house wasn't grand. 2 bedrooms, a deep porch, a kitchen that somehow always smelled faintly of coffee and sawdust, no matter how much I cleaned, but it was mine in a way nothing else ever had been. Not assigned, not inherited out of obligation. Chosen, earned, loved. My mother received the china, my brother received the attention, and I received the house. For a brief, beautiful moment, I believed my family had finally gotten something right. How naive I was. Because while I was building bridges across oceans, the people who shared my blood were quietly dismantling the foundation beneath my feet. And the cruelest part? I handed them the keys myself. 14 months before everything collapsed, my grandfather passed away peacefully in his sleep. 84 years old. Still living in the bedroom he had repainted 3 separate times because he could never quite find the perfect shade of white. The funeral was small. My mother cried the loudest and left the earliest. A week later, I sat across from attorney Harold Brandt in a dark paneled office downtown. I was exhausted, heartbroken, running on terrible coffee and grief. He slid a folder toward me. Words floated across the desk. Irrevocable trust. Beneficiary. Successor trustee. I nodded, signed where he pointed, and thought only one thing mattered. The house was safe. What I didn't know then, mi amor, was that my grandfather had seen the storm coming long before I ever noticed the clouds. He had spent years building protections around that house, protections hidden inside documents I never bothered to read. That mistake would nearly cost me everything, because while I was mourning him, others were already measuring the rooms, planning, waiting, and dreaming about money that was never theirs. Sunday arrived wrapped in golden sunlight, the kind of afternoon that makes everything appear innocent. How strange, Carino. That betrayal always prefers beautiful weather. My parents' backyard looked like a picture from a family magazine. My father stood proudly at the grill. My mother arranged lemonade and lemon bars with practiced perfection. Relatives filled the patio chairs, summoned to witness what they believed would be my surrender. And there, swaying gently in the breeze, hung Walter's old porch swing. 1971. The carved letters caught the sunlight like a blessing from another lifetime. I looked at it and felt my grandfather beside me. Quiet, patient, certain. Just as he had always been. The Prescotts arrived a few minutes later, standing nervously near the gate. They looked confused, exhausted, and frightened. My mother's smile faltered the moment she saw them. "Brina, why are they here?" I met her eyes. "Because they're part of this story, too." The smile disappeared completely. I placed my folder on the picnic table. A simple folder. Nothing dramatic. No shouting. No threats. Just paper. The most dangerous thing in the world when the truth is written on it. My mother immediately launched into her speech. Family, sacrifice, misunderstandings, hard decisions. The words flowed from her as naturally as breathing. Then came the sentence she had been repeating since Walter's funeral. It should have been mine. There it was. The truth. Not hidden anymore. Not dressed up in excuses. Pure entitlement. My father joined her. "The house paid for the trip," he announced proudly, as if he were discussing a vacation discount instead of theft. As if my grandfather's legacy had simply become spending money. Trent laughed from his chair. "It's just a house. Just a house. Dios mío. People who have never built something with love always believe it is replaceable." I let them finish. Every word, every excuse, every lie. Then I opened the folder. The sound was soft, yet somehow it silenced the entire yard. I laid the first document on the table. "This is the deed." The second. "This is the signature." Then 15 authentic samples. "And these are mine." Faces began changing. Confusion, concern, fear. I continued calmly. The forensic examiner confirmed the deed signature is forged. No one spoke. I placed down my passport. According to this document, I was in Portugal. Then my work records. And according to these records, I was standing on a bridge site in Lisbon on the exact day I supposedly signed this paperwork. The silence deepened. I looked toward Renee. Poor Renee. Her face had gone completely pale. There is no entry in your notary journal for that day. Tears filled her eyes instantly, because she knew, everyone knew, the game was over. Then I delivered the final truth. The house was never yours. Atima looked directly at my mother. It was held in Grandpa's trust. The color drained from her face. For the first time in my life, she looked genuinely shocked. Not because she had been caught, because she had discovered she was never entitled to it in the first place. Her anger exploded. "How can you do this to your family?" The question echoed across the yard. I almost smiled, because that is always the question people ask when consequences finally arrive. Not, "What did we do wrong?" but "How dare you respond?" I answered quietly. "Because the house you sold was never yours to sell." The words settled over the gathering like falling stone. Then I explained everything. The forged deed, the fraud investigation, the lawsuit, the title dispute, the recovery of the sale proceeds, the criminal case, and finally, the clause. Walter's clause, my grandfather's masterpiece, the protection he had built years earlier. Anyone attempting to steal trust property would lose their inheritance. Completely. The reaction was immediate. My mother looked as though the earth had opened beneath her feet. Trent turned gray. My father began shouting. But their voices sounded distant now, like noise carried away by the wind, because the decision had already been made long before that afternoon. Walter had made it. Years ago. From the moment they chose greed, they chose this outcome. "He spent the money," Trent kept repeating. "I already spent it." The desperation in his voice would have been almost funny if it had not been so tragic. Actions, mi amor, eventually send their invoices. And this one had arrived. Then Renee broke. Not dramatically, not theatrically, honestly. Perhaps for the first time, tears streaming down her face, she whispered, "I needed the money." My heart softened despite everything, because unlike the others, she wasn't pretending, she was guilty, and she knew it. "I know," I told her gently. But it was still wrong. Some truths hurt precisely because they are true. I gathered my documents and returned them carefully to the folder. The shouting continued behind me. But none of it belonged to me anymore. I walked toward the Prescotts. The young nurse was crying. Her husband looked devastated. "I'm so sorry about your house," she whispered. I smiled sadly. It was always more than a house. Because it was. It was memory. Promise. Love.legacy. Then I crossed the yard toward the enormous red sold sign standing where Walter's tomatoes once grew. I wrapped both hands around the post and pulled. One clean motion. The sign came free. Dirt scattered across the grass. I carried it to the dumpster and laid it on top of the broken cabinets they had torn from my grandfather's kitchen. A fitting place for it. Above me, the swing creaked softly. H19971. Still standing, still waiting. Just like him. I reached into my pocket and felt the familiar brass key, the same key Walter had pressed into my hand all those years ago. The same promise, the same trust, the same love. Closing my fingers around it, I looked back one final time. Not with anger, not with triumph, simply with certainty. "I'll see you in court," I said calmly. Then I walked away. And for the first time in my life, I understood something my grandfather had always known. Quiet people are often mistaken for weak people, but silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is confidence, sometimes silence is patience, and sometimes silence is a woman carrying enough evidence to let the truth speak for itself. The daughter who never caused problems did not win by shouting. She won because she never stopped believing in facts. And in the end, mi amor. Facts are stronger than lies. Paper is stronger than manipulation, and a promise kept is stronger than any betrayal.